Hi, welcome to the Reloading Podcast here on the Firearms Radio Network. My name's Mike and I'm your host. Today we're going to be reloading 40 caliber Smith & Wesson. I'm going to show you how we're going to actually use lead cast bullets today, and we're going to go through kind of the whole process. That noise you hear in the background, that is my media tumbler, and that's a vibration tumbler from Hornady. And as you can hear, it's kind of loud. So we're going to unplug that. I've actually had it vibrating for quite some time. A lot of the show today, you're not going to be seeing my face, and frankly, you don't really want to look at my ugly mug anyway. Because right in here is going to be the important stuff. This is the stuff you guys need to see, and this is the stuff you guys need to know about. So, basically, it's set on 4 bumpers here, and it vibrates in the middle. And it uses the sorry, I'm getting used to one-shot tumbler media from Hornady. You can use corncob media, which this is kind of a basic. You can use walnut, crushed walnut shells. That's another popular one to use. The newest one to use is actually the stainless steel, but that you can't use this type of tumbler for. You actually have to use a separate tumbler that's either built for it, or what a lot of people are using is they're using rock tumblers. So what we need to do is we need to get the brass out of there. And what I did is I threw just a few in here, and what happens is you tumble it, and then you can, I just usually throw my scoop in here, that way I know where it is. Yeah, it causes some static. You can kind of see some of the media on here. Basically what it is, it's crushed corn cob. And then you just kind of sift around, shake it a little bit, and hopefully you find some brass. Usually what I found is it usually all settles in kind of one area. Once you find that little golden hot spot, then it's a lot easier to find your brass. And as you sift around, you'll actually kick some of it up to the top. You got to be careful, because it's really easy to throw this all over the place as you're kind of sifting. For those of you who have cats, this is a very common motion. One thing you got to be careful, especially with pistols, is the primer hole, which you can, as I hold it right there, you can see all the way through and see lighting up, is kind of small on a pistol versus a rifle. And one of the things you'll find out is the media doesn't flow all the way through. The other problem is, because of that, it doesn't always clean out the primer pocket. So what you want to do is grab your handy dandy primer pocket cleaner. This one's from Lee. All the brands make them, they're different. I think Lyman's actually got one that's actually on a screwdriver handle. But this one's got 2 different sizes on the end. And what you do is you're cleaning out all the old primer residue. So now, oops, sorry, a little close. It's a little shinier on this inside. And I've got my wood block here, which I'm going to put them in. As you can see, I've got some cartridges that are already pre-made. That was from a episode that went horribly wrong. That's on the YouTube channel, so you can check that out. It's good for a laugh, if nothing else. But it really kind of shows you how, even if you're an experienced reloader, you can have bad days. And there's nothing to keep you from reaching in here, grabbing them by hand. Sifting's a little neater, a little easier. But like I said, there's nothing to keep you from reaching in and grabbing them by hand. And this one here, if it'll focus, maybe, maybe not. Probably not. Let's see if we can light that up. Oh, I guess not. If you zoom in, well, you can kind of see that you can't really see all the way through, because there is media in there. Sometimes you can tap it out, sometimes you got to blow it out. Some people I know keep air compressor handy. One of the things I'm noticing is these cases aren't getting as clean as they should be. So what that tells me, yes, the outside's nice and shiny, but the inside's not as clean. So what that's telling me is it's telling me my media is kind of getting worn. Hornady makes a refresher for their media, which you just pour in there and let it sit, and it kind of works its way in there and helps make it a little all happy and better. Some of them don't have that option. So I probably won't buy the refresher just because this is a few years old and I really want to try walnut. I want to try walnut shell. I've heard it's a lot better. At some point in time I probably will go to stainless steel. Not now, just because I have this tumbler and they're not cheap. And I don't really want to put the money into getting another one. Especially with how much I spend. You gotta kind of balance your reloading budget with life. And yes, reloading's nice. Yes, it helps. But you really gotta kind of, first off, keep the peace with the house. And if you're spending a bunch of money on stuff, it can get you into trouble. Now sometimes you just can't get it out. And then you gotta have some sort of, usually I have a needle around here somewhere, which today I don't. So we're gonna use a pocket knife blade. Or in this case, a multi-tool. And you just kind of pop that loose. And it pops out. That's the nice thing, is they're usually a small enough kernel, so they'll pop out. And you just make sure you get them all out. Make sure you get them all in here. I'm only going to do 10 rounds today, just because I want to get a show and kind of get you an idea of what's going on for reloading. I'm not going to go through and reload all. Well, frankly, if I try to do all my brass, I've got a couple thousand rounds, so we'd be here for a while. But I'm going to save mass reloading for later when I actually show you how to use a progressive. Today it's just the basic single stage. Get you the idea of what it actually looks like to reload some cartridges. Kind of give you some of the basic terminology. And sorry if I say a lot, I'm working on it, but it still hasn't got completely over the whole thing. It's one of those nervous habits. Alright, we got that part out of the way. Next up is when we deprime these, it already goes through and sizes them. These are all deprimed. One of the things you can do if the edges feel rough is, this is called a chamfer tool. Basically what it does is it's got an edge on here that just kind of takes the burrs off, both inside and outside the casing. This is to go inside the casing, this is go outside. So you put it over and turn it, and then inside and turn it. You don't really have to use these unless you're trimming the case. I'm not trimming these because it's my first reload. Usually you want to start checking your length of your cases, your second or third. And once you get to your second or third time, then it stretches the brass out enough you have to worry about it. I just realized you can't really see that brace. Okay, so now you can see everything a little better. We'll zoom out a little bit. So as you can see, I got the cartridges that are pre-made. This one here is just an extra one. I'm leaving it over there. You don't need to worry about that for now. So now we've got the cases all out. We got them all primed, or we've got them all set to prime. So we're going to go ahead and grab our Lee Auto Prime, which is right here. And you can see all the nice primers in there. These are small Magnum small pistol primers, which is what the recipe I'm using is called for. How this works is there's a push rod right there, which you can see as I move this handle, that moves, and then as I tap it, shake it around a bit, it's now replaced with a primer, which you can kind of see. So grab our case, and one of the other things that I did already is this has a shell holder in it. And what a shell holder is exactly that. It is actually sized to fit to specifically hold a particular cartridge. This one is specifically for 40 cal and 10 millimeter. The nice thing is with Lee, they make a few different options, so they fit a few different. How this works is you take your auto prime, push it down a bit, slide it in, making sure it lines up real nice, and then you just slide your first brass in, and usually I'll hold it like this because it makes it a little easier to get gravity doing your work. And then you just squeeze down, and you squeeze the same every time, and it will push your primer in, and it looks like that. One of the things you want to make sure is that primer is smooth all the way across. Run your finger across that. If you don't get it set right, you will have problems. You can have pre-strikes, which means when your bolt slams closed, it's going to fire that primer. If you're lucky, the primer just goes and it actually doesn't completely shoot. More than likely, what you're going to get is you're going to premature discharge, and then you're going to have all sorts of problems. Reloading is a very serious hobby. You need to make sure that you are paying attention to what you're doing when you're doing it. Visually inspect and physically inspect every cartridge every step of the way. You can't lose focus. You can't play video games while you're doing reloading. You shouldn't drink while you reload. I knew some people that do it, and you know, that's their personal choice. I personally do not drink alcohol while I'm reloading because I want to make sure I focus. This is a very serious thing. If I screw up, at the very least, I'm going to break my gun. That's going to make me unhappy because that's going to cost me money. And that's not what reloading is about. At the very most, if you really screw up, you could wind up dead. Yes, I'm serious. You could wind up dead. If you double your powder charge on your cartridge and you exceed the case pressure, then what happens? Now, the reason, that one there, I just slapped it down and there is no primer in there. So what I need to do is flip them back out and shake it back in, because sometimes they do get turned and then they won't slide in right. You want to make sure that you see the brass or the gold inside of the primer. Some of these kind of roll around a little bit. Nice thing about this is if you shake it, it will actually flip them all the right direction. So now, got all 10 of my brass primed. So what I'm going to do, take your handy dandy bread twist tie. I shake all the primers down to the other end. Oops, sorry, don't mean to flip you off. Shake all the primers down to the other end. I'll squeeze this back up, slide that twist tie on, and now primers can't fall out. No matter how hard you shake, because the press rod is up keeping that closed. So now your primer thing's safe and you don't have to worry about those falling all over the place. Other thing, as you can see, Scotch tape keeps that lid on so it doesn't fall off. And yes, that lid will fall off if you're not careful. You'll see that when you watch the, shall we say, Follies episode. Okay, so next up, we got to put powder in these things. So without powder, you have a squib load. With a squib load, you're going to have a piece of lead stuck in your barrel, which means now you have to figure out how to get that out. If you're smart enough to realize that you have a squib load and not just a different type of misfire. What that means is the primer is usually powerful enough to push the bullet out of the case into the barrel. Sometimes in a pistol you'll actually get it to go all the way out of the barrel. Most often you won't. Today I'm using Unique by Alliant. There's lots of different powders out there, and what you got to do is you got to spend some time, check for your recipes, and eventually you'll come across one you like. They're all different depending on what type of bullet you're using. If you are using cast lead bullets and you don't find a recipe for that particular powder you're using, what you can do is use the same bullet weight of like a hollow point or a jacketed hollow point of Nature bullet, and go off that. You don't want to use a full metal jacket because they're a little more solid and they can handle a little more pressure behind them. Use a jacketed hollow point or a lead core. It'll give you, it'll give you a lower pressure. You definitely don't want to go with a maximum pressure load on that though. And what I'll show you when you look in the show notes, you'll see the link to the recipes for all the different, I'll actually have the Unique recipe powder link in there. I'll also have the load data that I used. One of the nice things with Lee, with their die sets, I have Lee just because of cost more than anything. A lot of people knock Lee. I've actually heard some people say Lee is the high point of reloading. That's not true. Lee reloaders actually work very well, and you just got to make sure you take care of them just like everything else. I've had this press here for 6 years now. It's loaded a few thousand runs of 308, and I've not had a problem with it. Just make sure you keep it lubed and clean, and the only thing you really got to worry about dirtying up is the RAM, and you just clean that off like you would any other sort of, you know, use any sort of like regular cleaner. And then use what I use on mine, because I keep it clean and stuff, is I just use, basically this is one of those little bottles like fishing reel oil, lightweight oil, and I use that. Some people use 3-in-1 oil, some people get more serious, some people use REM oil. I've seen, I don't honestly know what the specification from Lee is, because I've never bothered to look, because I've never had a problem with it. One of the nice things about Lee, back to Lee, and most companies do this, but I know Lee does for sure, with their die sets, they actually include reloading data. And you can kind of see, I'm not going to show exactly, but this is the directions that come with the Lee. So one side is going to be your dies, your guarantee, and some information. They give you the overall cartridge length, which is an important thing. Max trim length, and maximum overall length. Those are important things, especially for chamber. The nice thing is this is a 40 Smith & Wesson and 10 millimeter. They give you all the parts lists. In case you break something, you can call and order it. Their guaranteed reloading products are guaranteed not to wear out or break from normal use for 2 full years. They will be repaired or replaced. That's their dies. Their presses have different warranties, but their dies they guarantee for 2 years because of the fact that dies do wear out. One of the other things is on the back side, they give you instructions on what the dies are for and how they work. Now, what you can do is, one of their dies, you can actually do this. And this is their powder through expanding die. So what you want is you can actually put your funnel on here, and they actually make this so you unscrew this. And you put your funnel in here, and then you screw it down. And then the funnel just kind of sits there. And then you put it in your press, and you can actually pour the powder through the die with the cartridge sitting up there. I don't personally use that, just because I never really used it. At some point in time I will. But my original dies that I got didn't have that die. That's kind of a bonus die, shall we say. The other dies that are in this are the depriming die, and with this one you can see it's got this little pin. What that does is actually goes through and punches the primer out of the old brass. You can see this, sorry, I'm getting used to this whole camera thing, and left, right, and backwards, and yeah. Okay, so you can see this has got the old primer in it basically. And this won't slide down because it's not on the press. You do need a little bit of force, but it slides down into the cartridge and then it pushes that out. We're not using that one right now because we've got those already ready. And then the other one is what they call the factory crimp die. And what this one does is, this one's more for precision. It actually puts a crimp like you would get from factory ammunition, which means it's a lot more solid of a crimp. The die that's on here right now is just the regular bullet seating die. Excuse me, sorry. And what that does is it just actually seats the bullet and puts a light crimp on it. You can kind of, I don't know if you can really see, it puts a little light crimp on it. You can adjust it so it puts a little harder crimp. But when I'm loading pistol ammo, I don't really put a hard crimp on it because I'm not caring about precision accuracy. When you're setting it up for precision accuracy, what that does is, excuse me, sorry, excuse me, what that does is it sets that crimp to the correct, to the exact same every single time. So you need a certain amount of pressure to get that bullet moving down the bore every single time. So you're taking another variable out of your shooting. With precision reloaders, and we'll find that out later, I'm going to have a couple of the gang from We Like Shooting On that do their own reloading, and not only do their own reloading, but they reload for precision distance shooting. So there's a lot involved in that. And there's a lot of detail that isn't in just regular, especially pistol. Pistol, a lot of the times, especially when you're loading up a lot of rounds just for practice, you're not going to take a lot of time to really make sure everything's really precise. You're going to make sure you do your powder right, and you're going to make sure you get your primer seated correctly and everything like that, but you're not going to be doing like to the 100th of a grain of powder. You're not going to be, you know, weighing the bullets to make sure they're all the same weight. You're not going to be weighing the cartridges to make sure they're all the same weight. You're not going to be weighing the brass to make sure it's all the same weight. You're not going to be trimming each brass so it's all exactly the same, to the exact same specifications. There's a lot of detail work that goes into that precision reloading that you don't do for normal. So, okay, now that we're done chasing that squirrel, we're going to go back to where we were, which is the powder. Now, trying to get this big chunk of powder through this funnel into here, kind of a pain. So what I do, the old cheap coffee cup. One of the things that they do make all nice and fancy is a powder trickler. I have not purchased one yet, but I guarantee you that when I go to load my next set of 308s, I will be, because it really makes it handy to get that fine touch. A little easier than the way I do it, which you get to see in a second. Now, there's a couple different things you can do for weighing powder. Lee has their powder dipper system, which I don't have out here at the current second, the whole set, but most of their dies do come with one. Basically, it's a little powder dipper. This one's half a cc, and there's a conversion chart to tell you what powder you would use. Like on this one here, it actually tells you on here, there's the column, is they say the start grains, the start volume, what your auto disc setting is, and then what your Lee dipper setting is. Now, because of the charge I'm using, which is 5.4, it doesn't work. Because it wouldn't be quite so accurate. Excuse me. Just to the way it works out, it doesn't really work. As you're looking on here, you'll see the different things, and they'll tell you which your options are. But 5.4, unfortunately, there isn't a powder dipper that works. It's in between a 5. Basically, it's in between 0.5 and 0.7. So there isn't really any way to make that work. So what I do is there's with the anniversary kit that I got this press with, there's actually a manual scale, which I don't use because it's a pain. I don't even have it out. It's buried in my other tote. But what I did pick up is this little buddy. This is from Hornady, just because of the fact that it was the least expensive, best quality. I did have another one I picked up a couple of years ago from Cabela's. It was some off-brand. Don't buy off-brand. They're crap, and you'll have all sorts of problems. Now, because my bench, as you can see from the diagram, the design is pressed board. It's not always exactly flat. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my handy-dandy Cabela's wood block. That's where I got the idea to make mine. It was off the Cabela's. I used a Forstner bit, a 1/2-inch Forstner bit, and just some wood. Kind of did a little experimenting in a couple of holes to see how deep I would need to go. As you can see, this one kind of wobbles around here, but the next set over, which is actually where I went, you know, you can see they're kind of different heights, and I just kind of went till I got one that didn't wobble. So that's how I came up with that. Something you can do easily. Now, one of the key important things with your electronic scale is you got to have a level. Well, how am I going to find a level? I don't have a level handy. Do you have a smartphone? You have a level handy. There are plenty of apps out there that you can get that have a level. Excuse me. So what I do is I'm going to set that on there, and we'll zoom the camera in a little bit here. So you can see it's level. So I'm good with that. for starters. And one of the problems working with wood, you pick up splinters. But now I know it's level, so I'm going to have a good level surface for starting with my press, or with my scale. Very important. If you don't have it level, it won't weigh right. So, take our scale, put it on here like so. I put it sideways just so it balances better. And we're looking at buttons here. I want to show you the on-off, the mode, and the tare. And I don't know, it's not really coming in clearly, so let's see if we can zoom in a little better and get it to pick up a little better. Alright, so what we're going to do is the same thing you should do every single time you go to weigh your powder. Even if the scale sits in the same place and never moves, you always want to check it. And how they check them is with a weight. Usually it's 100 gram, and you really can't see that there, so we'll set it on the scale for a second. Scale's off, so it doesn't make a difference, but usually it's 100 gram, and usually most of these scales will weigh in grams, ounces, grains, and carats. It's usually your common. So with this scale, the instructions are all in the, let's zoom out a bit now. You've seen that. Oops, sorry, wrong way. Everything's backwards. Okay, so on the lid, most of your decent scales will actually put instructions. So first thing we want to do is we want to turn it on and let it sit. Okay, it'll zero. Once it zeros, then we're going to hold down the mode button, and it'll go to cal, which is CAL for calibrate. And then we're going to hit mode one more time, and it's going to think for a second, and then it's going to put the weight that I'm supposed to get. We're going to let it sit, and it says pass, so now we're good to go. Put your scale right away back into your box, because you don't want to lose that, because in order to buy one, they're usually 20 to 50 bucks, depending on where you're going, and you're not always accurate. Second setting we want is tare. We've adjusted the scale, it's currently 0. When we throw that on there, now we have a weight of 133.5 grains. Well, you can either do math in your head, or you can hit the tare button, which re-zeros the scale. When you go to your local deli next time and you order your favorite pound of your favorite deli salad, you'll notice they throw the container up there sometimes, and they have to hit, it'll show a weight for the container. Sometimes it doesn't. Usually what they've got is they've got a preset tare in that digital scale that automatically accounts for that particular size. So what they do is they have to actually hit a button. Usually it's quart to quart or whatever like that, and it automatically configures. If not, then sometimes you'll see them throw the empty container up there. They'll hit a button and pull it back off. That's when they're tearing for the scale. Okay, so first things first, with your actual powder, don't put your powder in your pan while it's on the scale unless your scale specifically says it's set up for trickling, because it will throw it off. 5.4 grains isn't a lot of powder, so I use this teaspoon or tablespoon, and then I'll throw some powder in there, and we'll throw it on the scale, and you want to try and get it centered on the scale. So I got 8 grains in there. That's a little bit too much. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this and tap some out. Check it. So we're down to 6.3, but we still need to get lower. Now I know I don't need to tap as much, so this is a flake powder. So basically it's a flake powder. 5.4. Yay, we're where we want to be. Oh, hold on. It's changing. So no, we're at 5.3. So we just need to put a smidge back in. As I was saying, this is flake powder. There's flake, there's extruded, and there's ball. Flake is basically like they took a cylinder and cut just the end off of it. Extruded is the full cylinder. And then ball This is exactly as it sounds, little powder balls. This is where a powder trickler would come in handy, because I wouldn't have to keep grabbing a couple little flakes with the spoon and toss it on the scale. And if you're getting goofy measurements, try and settle the powder down a little more, and then set her on the scale again and see. And if you're right on that edge, it'll fluctuate back and forth. Now I'm at 5.4. Now, one of the things with this handy dandy little wood thing I made is, with the powder funnel I have, is it's got a rather wide opening. And if I try and set it on, let's zoom out a little bit, you can kind of see. So I set it on the brass and it kind of flops all over the place. So what I've done is I've figured out that I actually just need to put the brass into the bottom of the funnel and pour it that way. Now, one of the things is I've been sitting here talking to you, this has gone different. So what I want to do is I'm going to pour it into here, because I already know it's a pre-measured amount. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off, turn it back on, and I'm going to re-tare the pan. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my powder, I'm going to re-dump it back into the pan. I'm going to set the pan back on and see what's going on. If you're not sure, double check, triple check. If it happened to be what it was showing, which was 5.7, in this particular case, not a big deal. Not a really big deal. However, if it's off more than that, then it could be a big deal. And if you're already towards the max pressure, which I'm not, I'm starting at the lowest, you could really cause some problems. Because it doesn't take much to go over your pressure to be a danger to where it's blowing brass out and it's causing all sorts of issues. And one of the things you'll find with digital scales, sometimes they do creep a little bit if you leave it sitting on there a little bit too long. Just the nature of the digital scale, especially the lower end ones. The more expensive you get, the better quality they are, the more reliable they are necessarily, and the more flexible they are, the more you can do with them. Actually, you can get, if you want to spend the money on them, they've got powder scales that will actually measure and dispense your charge. Most brands make them. Most your reloading brands make one where you can literally just type in your grains you want and it will automatically dispense it. Now, the other thing you want to watch for is getting anything on the scale pan. Dust, dirt, powder. Anything you get stuck on there can and will affect the accuracy. So you always want to make sure you keep it clean. The other thing you want to do is make sure you don't bump the scale once you get it zeroed, because it doesn't take much to knock it off. Now, even if I had a powder trickler, which I don't, but if I did, you still got a little bit of guesswork, but your chances of going over on your powder charge are a little less, because it allows you to just drop a grain or two at a time. So don't settle for close enough, because one of those days your close enough might wind up being too close or too far, and you could have a problem. As you can see, this is a little time consuming. But usually once you get into a rhythm, it goes pretty good. Now the other thing I'm doing, which I gotta zoom out so you can see this, because you don't really need to watch the scale that closely, is I'm putting the new powdered brass, and I just call it powdered because it's got the powder in it, in a different row from just the prime brass. The reason for that is that way I don't actually grab another brass. I don't grab one that I've already got powder in and accidentally double charge it. So you got to really pay attention to what you're doing. Should get some background music for you guys to listen to. And what I'll often do, just out of habit and out of making sure I keep stable or keep accuracy, is I'll go ahead and tear that every couple of rounds, just to make sure I'm keeping it accurate. And as you go, you'll learn kind of how hard you can tap to get certain powder out, certain amount of powder out when you're way over or way under, how much to scoop back in. But as you go, you'll notice it's getting quicker and quicker on how long it takes to actually fill it, because the more you do it, the more you kind of get an idea of how much is actually in the pan and how much needs to be in the pan off your spoon or whatever measuring device you're using. What I have done in the past sometimes too is I've actually used the powder scoops, and a lot of times if you have something else to tap versus your finger, it helps because you can kind of control it a little better. Now in this case, first off, I forgot to silence my phone, so sorry about that. Let me take care of that quick. There we go. Alright. By the way, that was a cardinal, in case you all were wondering what bird that was. Alright. Now what I'm going to try with this next one is grab that little powder dipper and see how close we get, just for curiosity's sake. One of the things with the powder dippers is you don't want to scoop with the powder dipper because of the fact that every time you scoop you'll pack it differently. So what you want to do is you actually want to push it in and let the powder flow into it. And then what I usually do when I'm actually measuring is I have a business card or something along that lines that I scrape the top off. Now I'm going to go ahead and tear this puppy again quick just so I can get it set. And we'll see what the powder charges out of it. Now that was 3.4. So now you kind of have an idea why I couldn't really use it as an accurate. And obviously that wasn't, you know, completely full either. So that does make a difference. The other difference with powder dippers is They go by volume, and when you're using different powders, you will get different volumes because they fill different. Your extruded powder is going to fill differently in that than your flake powder is, and your flake powder is going to fill different than your ball powder. Just because of the way they all pack in, it does make a difference. So when you're using the powder dippers, if you're caring about any sort of accuracy and consistency, and you're really concerned about your pressures, you're going to want to check your weight. Now, one of the nice things with Lee, with their powder dippers, is they're all measured to be safe. They actually, when they estimate the conversion between the powder dipper and what the real weight would be, they do undercut that. Part of that is, I'm sure probably, corporate liability issues like everybody does. Rather be safe than sorry. But more importantly, it's because of safety issues. As I said, reloading is a very dangerous hobby if you're not doing it right. And so, what can happen if you overestimate? Now see, this time I scooped it in and I get a 4.4. So it all depends. And like I said, when you scoop it in, you can get different weight measures. I'll check it again next. I've got 2 cases left to fill, so I'll scoop it in again and kind of show you what happens. Just like the scale at home, make sure it stops moving before you decide that's the set measurement, because they do take a little while to adjust sometimes. If you're not sure, or you think something's goofy, then pull that thing off and make sure it goes 0. I got a friend that wants to get into reloading, so I'm going to try and get him here for a couple of these episodes where I'm kind of going through the basics and stuff. That way we can be talking back and forth, and I can be answering his questions, and as we get further along here, I'm going to have you guys email me questions or post questions to the Google Plus or Facebook page, and then I can answer those questions as we're going. Now see there, I had a couple pieces of powder on the scale, so I knocked those off. You want to be careful with your powder because you get powder all over the place. Obviously powder is flammable, and one flake here, one flake there isn't a bad deal, but when you start getting it piled up especially. The other thing is, have a dedicated vacuum for your reloading area. You'll hear people with all the rumors of, oh, if you're sucking up powder with your vacuum, it can blow up and stuff. Yes, it can. And primer and stuff. That's why you don't want to use your vacuum cleaner for sucking up a lot of your messes. There really isn't a accepted method for cleaning up powder. Basically, the easiest way to do that is grab a paper towel, get it wet, and use that. Now here again, I'm scooping it in a little slightly different manner, and we'll throw it on there. Now we got 3.8 or 3.9. Last time we had 4.4. That's what I'm talking about by scooping versus letting it fill in. You will not get a consistent powder flow. And Lee even tells you that when you watch their little video that they have on their website about powder dipping, about the powder dippers and how they work and all that. A lot of your component manufacturers have help videos on their particular sites. If you go to the show notes from the first show, you can find links for some of that. Also, YouTube's a great help, as well as, yeah, this will get posted on there. Also, reloading forums, stuff like that, if you're not sure. Okay, so now I'm done. Turn that puppy off and put her away. Before you move to your next portion of your project, make sure you clean up. Big thing with reloading is making sure you keep your area clean so you don't have to worry about, oh crap, my powder jug right here is sitting here with the lid off and I smack it and knock it all over the place. Not a good combination. Now I've got my coffee cup here. I'm going to use my handy dandy powder funnel. pour that in there like that. I'm going to set this off to the side for a second because that will gravity feed down. Make sure I'm out of my swinging area, so in case I do something stupid. This I don't need anymore, so I'll put that away. Grab another drink of water, sorry. Okay, so today we are reloading with 180 grain from Acme Bullet Company. Acme Bullet Company is here in Wisconsin, out of Germantown. This is a 100 round pack, and they give you one for luck, which I thought was kind of cool. I don't know if I'll actually reload the one or not. With lead, you need to pay attention. You need to make sure you're washing your hands when you're done. Don't be picking your nose or, you know, licking your mouth or eating food while you're reloading with lead, especially. Yes, it's not environmental lead, but it's still not good for your body. Some people, what they'll do is they get serious enough that they actually use rubber gloves. I don't get that serious unless I'm going to be reloading hundreds and hundreds of rounds where I'm going to be handling a lot. Just because it doesn't really make sense when you're only doing 10 rounds. So what I've got, over to the press as we wander up and over, and then we'll zoom in a little bit. Can't zoom in too much, otherwise we won't get to see the whole press. Boy, tripods. Lock and load and all that fun stuff. Alright. We'll zoom in a little more. Now, what we've got is we've got our shell holder on here. One of the things with Lee, their presses use different shell holders from their Auto Prime and their other hand utensils. So you're going to have different sets of shell holders. I've actually got mine right here, so I'll show you. This one here is the universal shell holder set. That's going to be for the presses and stuff like that. I don't even realize that logo was backwards. Strange. And then this one here is for the Auto Prime. They have listings in here for which ones fit which. As you can see, there's only 14 in here right now. Or no, sorry. Boy, you can tell I can count. There's only 10 in here right now. It comes with 11. I've got one in there right now, so. But it fits a whole bunch of different calibers. There may come a case in time, especially if you're wildcatting or something like that, but you may not have a shell holder that fits right. So you may have to contact whoever the manufacturer is and see. And the one thing you will find, sometimes you get lucky and they fit different presses, sometimes they don't. What the one I have on here right now is the actual, this is the bullet seat and feed die. I don't know why they call it this feed die, because you're not feeding anything through it. But what this one does is actually puts the bullet into the brass and seats it, and then puts a slight crimp on it to make sure it doesn't fall back out. How you set these is you crank it all the way down till it meets the actual shell holder. You crank it back 3 full turns, and what I did is I actually marked it on here. Through the magic of goofiness, we'll go over here and show you. So you can see right here I marked it, and that's how I determined for 3 turns. Now this top knob actually determines how shallow or deep you set the bullet into the brass, and you'll wind up playing around with it a little bit. If you have factory ammo that you can compare with, that's the best way to do it. That way you kind of get the gist. Otherwise, you kind of just have to do a trial and error. If you're going to do a trial and error, take an empty unprimed brass and with no powder in it, and just put your bullet in it and check and see. You don't want to have something that's too long get stuck in there and now it's a live cartridge because you thought you had it right. I had good old Winchester white box factory ammo And then I could compare the height and set them up right, so you can see that they match. So that's how I did that the first time, and I haven't touched it since, so it will be set the same. Well, that bolt's not coming out now. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you got your gunpowder in there, which I don't know if you can see it or not. You can only tilt it so far, and you can't, and I'm not shining the light in there because that's just asking for trouble. Slide it in your shell holder, take your bullet, set it on top. One of the nice things about this die is it actually has a 45-degree chamfer at the bottom, so if your bullet's not quite straight when it gets up there, let's see if we can zoom in a little better. You guys can see this a little better. Oop, wrong way. Okay, so if your bullet's not quite straight, you can say it's kiltered off a little bit like this. As it runs up, if it's too far, it'll jam. But if it's just a little bit off, like that, it'll actually line it up, press it in, and we pull it down, voila, your bullet's seated. Now one of the things you will notice with lead, ooh boy, come on, focus. Anyway, sorry. I'll show you that. With lead, it gets and shaves a little bit off. As you can see on here, there is a little bit of a problem, and it's not a big deal. You just kind of wipe it off. Usually when you're going to pack the bullets away, I'll do that, or I'll do that at the end and kind of clean them all up. And it's just a matter of throwing your bullet on. Now the nice thing is with lead bullets, it's a little softer material. It presses a little easier. If you're doing FMJs or you're doing a harder bullet, you will find maybe you need to do a little more force. The blue, in case you're wondering what the blue is on the bullet, yeah, that's an actual lubricant as it's going down the barrel. So usually it's like a wax, and it just kind of melts as it's going and helps the bullet get down the barrel a little better. Doesn't really cause, it's not something you really have to worry about. It's not going to cause you a lot of problems. Sometimes, depending on how your bullet seats, you can actually use that as a crimp spot, like a cannelure on a rifle bullet. But usually, most of the time with your pistols, you're not going to have your bullet seated out that far, given the fact that your overall cartridge length would be way too long then, and you're going to create head spacing issues. The reason for the overall cartridge length and all of that is you can create head spacing issues. Not as much with a straight walled cartridge, but especially with your rifle cartridges, where they've got the angled wall, like a 223 or a 308 or any of your Magnum rifle cartridges. What happens is that brass expands, and as it goes into the chamber, that will line up with that part of the chamber. However, your overall length of your brass is a lot longer, and what happens is the bolt slams home, but it won't slam home. It slams into the back of the brass, which is now sticking a millimeter outside of your chamber, so the bolt's not locked. You go ahead and pull you pull the trigger thinking everything's okay, and the bolt flies backwards. And you've got powder and brass and pieces of bits and everything flying all over the place, if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, it shoots the bolt out through the back of the rifle into your shoulder or your neck or something along that lines, and now you have a trauma situation. So you always want to be careful and make sure you're paying attention to your head spacing. Like I said, this is all first fired brass, so I don't really have that issue with your first fired brass. If you are concerned, then what you can do is you can do different things to check your length. they do make different tools and stuff to do that, and I'll cover that in different episodes. I don't want to throw a whole bunch at you all at once, because otherwise you're going to be sitting in the back there going, wow. Kind of just want to go step by step here and get you the basics. We'll cover all the different toys and tools and everything else in depth, and kind of go all over that. Now, my powder didn't flow as quick as I wanted it to, so then what you can do as we zoom back out here is you can kind of lightly tap, and that gets it to sift. Now, once it's all done, make sure all your powder's up, funnel's clean, shut your cap back on. Now make sure all your cartridges are reloaded. Check your bench. Make sure your bench is nice and clean. You don't have a lot of powder or anything all over it. And you're good to go. Take your powder and your primers, put them back where they belong, wherever you've got them locked up in safekeeping, so they're not out. Primers tend to be explosive. It doesn't take a lot of force to set one off, and if you set one off outside of a case, they go flying pretty far, pretty quick, and it can really injure someone. The old "you'll shoot your eye out" comes to mind from everybody's favorite Christmas movie, well, Christmas Story. The other thing, powder, very flammable. All it takes is a spark. Someday I'll show you that. Not today. As we go along in this travel down reloading road, I'm going to show you different things that you need to know. Sometimes some different fun things. But we're going to cover lots of different things, and you can see how different things work well, different things work badly. The powder thing, I want to make sure I've got a really clean area that we're going to do on the concrete floor. I've got one of the other things you want to do is make sure you've got a fire extinguisher handy, because as I've said, this is a dangerous, explosive hobby, and right there is where mine is. So my press is on one side, bolted down, and my fire extinguisher is right on the other side. I'm in between the two, so that means I can grab the fire extinguisher if something happens. Very important to make sure you practice safety. Just like at the range and everything else you do with firearms, you want to make sure you practice safety. That's our episode for today. Questions, complaints, concerns, ideas on how you thought you can do something better, by all means, either put them in the comments at the bottom of the video, or if you're listening to the audio podcast, send them to my Google Plus page, Reloading Podcast, or to the Facebook page, Reloading Podcast. Eventually I will have an email, just not at the current moment. It's kind of a step-by-step process. Getting a podcast up and going is not just a blink your eyes and away you go. It's an involved procedure. So bear with us as we're getting going. As you can see from the first video to this video, and then the two in between, it's a learning experience. I just ask you just bear with me as going through and learning. This is my first video podcast, or quite a bit different than audio, but reloading is not a subject you can do strictly audio alone. So the video important is very needed. Reloading is not something you can just read a book and learn about, or hear an audio program about. You really want to be able to see what's going on. And for those of you that don't have friends that are reloading and you want to get into reloading, I want to be that person, that guide for you. So thank you very much for tuning in, and have a good night.